So I would just like to preface a few things before the video starts. Number one, right off the bat, I'm coming off of being sick, so my voice sounds weird, it sounds congested. Please just bear with me. Number two, I was planning on talking about all of the tiers in one video, but unfortunately, I'm gonna have to split it up into multiple parts. See, the original plan was to upload one long video talking about each tier / level of Iceberg, but as a parent, after looking at 7 pages of research being just barely over the halfway point, that it's just not feasible for someone like me who's in college and also has a part-time job. So in order to get some content out and to keep that quality of the content relatively high, and also to keep me from burning myself out, I will be recording and uploading this Iceberg in multiple parts. And I promise I'm not trying to maximize clout. Anyways, the plan for this first video is to cover the first 3 tiers of this iceberg. And while that might not sound like a lot, trust me, tier 3 has the longest entry of this iceberg. This entry has like 2.5 pages of research. But yeah, without further ado, let's start the video. Alrighty, so the first tier is really just background information about the show, so I'll just give a quick overview of what it is before we actually get into the iceberg. So the first episode of Teletubbies came out on March 31st, 1997, and I didn't know this, but it was actually a British TV show. It was created by Anne Wood and Andrew Davenport, and in the show, there are 4 Teletubbies named Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Lala, and Poe, and there's a vacuum cleaner named Nunu. Every episode takes place in a grassy area called Teletubbyland. And just a little fun fact, the place where Teletubbyland used to be was transformed into a pond, as there were numerous trespassers who would jump the landowner's fences and cross cattle just to get to it. But anyways, episodes would consist of interactions such as footage of children displayed on screens of the Teletubbies' stomachs, Nunu causing problems, magical events, and playful banter between the Teletubbies and the voice trumpets, which consist of several periscopes that come out of the ground and play with as well as supervise the Teletubbies. These are also the only characters that speak in complete sentences besides the narrator. The Teletubbies' last episode aired on February 16th of 2001, and there was a reboot of the show that first aired on November 9th, 2015, and went on until the last episode aired on October 12th of 2018. And they've also got a Twitter account. That's it for tier 1. Like I said, it was just going to be some background information, so let's get into tier 2. The first entry of tier 2 is called the band episode. The name of this band episode is called Seesaw, and it's a Teletubbies episode, go figure, that was taken off air due to a segment called The Lion and the Bear being too scary / inappropriate for its young viewers. The main issues that people had with the segment was that the characters, which were constructed out of wood, had very uncanny features like their eyes, ears, and arms. There were also some uncomfortable scenes, music, dialogue, and voice acting, at least for the children. The original episode aired in 1977 with an edited version to make it less scary, airing in 2001, a whole 24 years later. I'll go ahead and play the clip for you right now.
I'm the bear, I'm the bear, and I'm coming! I'm the bear, with brown fuzzy hair. I'll go running over here, and I'll go running over there. I'm the bear, with brown fuzzy hair. I'll hide over here, and I'll hide over there. Can you see me? I'm the bear, with brown fuzzy hair, and I know a joke.
And the second entry of this iceberg is called the Teletubbies, and no, they don't have any relation to P. Diddy. The Teletubbies are just baby Teletubbies. There are 8 of them in the show, called Ping, Dougie D, Ruru, Pumby, Dada, Mimi, Ba, and Nin. I think that's how you say it. And they're actually all voiced by the same actor, Teresa Gallagher. The Teletubbies show consists of playtime where they play with the Teletubbies, sleepy buys, which only happens at the end of some episodes, where they go to sleep, and song time, which was introduced in season 2, where the narrator and the Teletubbies sing the Teletubbies theme song. The third entry of this list, Reboot Songs, is just the theme song for the rebooted series, which I mentioned started in 2015. I'll go ahead and play it for you now. The fourth entry of this tier list is called Tinky Winky's Face, and I'm pretty sure this is referring to Tinky Winky's face in the fan-made game Slendytubbies. He has a couple of different appearances, starting with Alive, P1, P2, P1 Classic, and P1 Tubbycraft. I'm not going to get into the lore of the Slendytubbies right now because they have their own entry in tier 3. The fifth entry of this tier is called Ships, and I'm really hoping that this is just talking about the magical event called the 3 Ships, because I refuse to believe that people would ship characters together. Like I said, the 3 Ships is a magical event that occurs in the episode Playing in the Rain. In the episode, Teletubby Land is filled with water, and 3 ships that appear as cruise or ocean liners sail past the Teletubbies, and after the magical event is over, the ships disappear and the water drains itself. Okay, the sixth entry on this list is fan arts, and I don't want to spend time on this entry. It's just really uncanny and weird. It's just fan art of the Teletubbies, with most of them being drawn as human, which is just it's I don't have any words to describe it. I hate it. I know that I hate it though. Although this one is awesome. The seventh and final entry of this tier is called Songs, and I'm going to assume that this one is talking about the Teletubbies album, aptly titled Teletubbies The Album. There are 14 songs on this album that runs a total length of 49 minutes and 50 seconds. Would you believe me if I said that this album was based on the hit kids TV show Teletubbies? The first entry of Tier 3 is called Slendytubbies. Slendytubbies is a fan-made game that's based on Slenderman the 8 Pages. I believe it has a total of 6 canon games, which consist of Slendytubbies, Slendytubbies 2D, Slendytubbies 2, Slendytubbies 3, Slendytubbies Guardian Collection, and Slendytubby Worlds. There are other installments that I'm not going to be considering canon, like Slendytubbies Anniversary Edition and Slendytubbies Dipsy's Workshop, as well as a DLC I will not count as canon, and a miniseries on YouTube called Slendytubbies 3 miniseries What Comes After. I will not be discussing the game yet because there is an entry specifically focused on the lore for this game. The second entry of this tier is the Fandom Wiki, and when you first open the Teletubbies Fandom Wiki, there's not really much to look at. The main page is just an overview of what the wiki is about and gives you a couple links for different websites where you can learn more about the Teletubbies if you want. But if you look near the top of the page, you can click on a link that takes you to over 1,800 articles about the Teletubbies. Also, the user is promised free Tubby Custard and Tubby Toast if they help out on the wiki. The third entry on this tier is fan-made characters. I genuinely have no idea what this topic is about, like specifically. My best guess is this wiki page full of random characters that are for some reason under the Teletubbies fanon wiki. Other than that, I've got zero idea. The fourth entry on this tier is called the Fanon Wiki, and this is just the front page of the wiki I mentioned earlier, the one with the link to the insane amount of articles about the Teletubbies. I'm going to skip over the Slendytubbies lore just for one entry because I want that to be the one we end on. So the fifth entry on this tier is called Teletubbies Species, and when I was doing research on this, what I found is that apparently Teletubby human hybrids are humans that contain Teletubby DNA and also have Teletubby features such as the television in their stomach as well as antennas. Apparently, Teletubbies have existed since time has existed, and their princess found Earth to be a suitable place for life and created Teletubby Land, married a human man, and had a daughter together in what is known as the first Teletubby human hybrid. I feel really gross talking about this entry. Alright, and now for the one everybody has been waiting for. The 6th entry on this tier is the Slendytubbies lore. This is the entry that is 2.5 pages of research. So, let's get into it. As far as the plot for this entry, it isn't confirmed, but the best thing we've got for the first game is that Tinky Winky started acting weird after he ate some custard. He then went on to kill Dipsy and Lala, but didn't get to kill Poe since he offed himself. But the player controls one of 2 officers that were sent to investigate where Tinky Winky went ballistic. In Slendytubbies 2, the TLDR is that 5 years have passed since the incident, and you are trying to find out what happened. Basically, Teletubbies are not natural, meaning that they have been created in a lab, and that custard is genetically modified. And Tinky Winky is believed to have had a bad dose of this custard, leading to the events of the first game. Now, the lore for the 3rd game, Slendytubbies 3, is lengthy, so bear with me as it has a campaign with multiple chapters. Alright, so, Chapter 0, titled It Was Good. The player takes on the role of Poe, where Poe notices Tinky Winky get up in the middle of the night, destroy the Tubby custard machine, and leave the house. Poe can either wake up Lala and Dipsy or venture out to look for Tinky Winky on his own. If Poe goes out to look on his own, he will return to the house to find Dipsy's headless body, and then Tinky Winky will kill Poe. After this, the Guardian appears, and the player needs to collect Tubby custards in order to prevent things from getting worse. If the player decides to wake up the other 2 Teletubbies before going out to look for Tinky Winky, Lala tells Poe to grab a builder's torch, which acts as a flashlight. Dipsy decides to stay at the house in case Tinky Winky comes back, and Poe and Lala exit the house and begin a search. Poe and Lala split up, and after Poe finds nothing and turns back to get with Lala, he finds Tinky Winky facing with his back to him, with Lala's lifeless body on the ground, blood leaking from their eye sockets. The player will be forced to run back to the house where they find Dipsy decapitated. Sorry, Dipsy, there is no ending where you aren't headless. And Poe ends up dying no matter how far the player runs, and the POV goes back to the Guardian. And that's the end of Chapter 0. Chapter 1, titled A New Day, is where the quote-unquote real story begins, since Chapter 0 is kind of like a prelude. In Chapter 1, you play as the Guardian, and your goal is to collect Tubby custards before it's too late. The player is trapped in the control room of a secret lair and must sneak past 2 newborns, which are Teletubbies that have been recently created by the creation machines, which are machines that create newborns, and are led by the newborn general. After the player makes it past, they need to find 5 Tubby custards, each in different locations. Upon finding the last one, Tinky Winky will actually eat that custard, chase the player, and the player has to escape to what's called the outskirts. That is the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, titled The Journey, has a couple different routes to start. At the end of Chapter 1, when the player must escape to what's called the outskirts, they can either choose to go through the mountains or through the cave. If the player chooses to run the mountain route, they run into a beast and get dragged away and awaken to have a conversation with a droid called Unit 437. 437 explains that the beast that knocked him out is called the Yeti Tubby, who was an experimental subject along with 2 other subjects, the Cave Tubby and the Arrow Tubby. When the player tries to escape, Unit 437 alerts the Yeti where a chase sequence occurs, and the player has to avoid going to areas where there is screaming, and if successful, they escape to the outskirts. Now, if the player doesn't go through the mountains, they have to go through the cave where the Cave Tubby is lurking. The cave is a huge maze where the player has to avoid running into the Cave Tubby and can find notes scattered around that were written by one of the experiments, which is presumed to be the Arrow Tubby. Eventually, the player is chased by the Cave Tubby once they go far enough, and escaping the cave leads to the outskirts. Now, once the player has reached the outskirts, they will meet up with Lala, and depending on whether or not the player had decided to wake her up in Chapter 0, she will have different appearances. If the player had woken her up, Lala will appear in an infected state, and the player needs to collect 8 tubby custards without making any noise, since Lala is blind and will kill the player if she hears them. After 8 tubby custards are collected, the player can either choose to kill Lala or leave her trapped where they found her. If the player had chosen not to wake her up in Chapter 0, Lala will not be infected. However, she admits to having eaten one of the infected custards and knows that she will mutate soon. Again, the goal is to find 8 tubby custards, and once that task is completed, the player can either choose to put Lala out of her misery or leave her to mutate. Either way, the player leaves and goes to the satellite station, and that is the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, called Run Away, is the final chapter in the game. When the player enters a satellite station, there is a blue Teletubby and a security laser, and the objective here is to enter the secret center to contact the military. The blue Teletubby is named Ron, and he explains that the corpses around the facility are secret center workers, and they were all killed by a headless monster with a chainsaw. The player is informed that they need to nab a key card from one of the dead workers in order to access the secret center. After the player leaves Ron, a chainsaw can be heard and Ron is killed. After the player finds the key card, they begin hallucinating, seeing Po, Lala, Tinky Winky, and Dipsy in their regular fashion. That is, not infected, not headless, with all their eyes, all that good stuff. It reveals that Dipsy is the headless monster that is killing everybody, and once the player leads the monster to a laser, it is killed and the player picks up the chainsaw. Upon entering the secret center, Nunu and a voice trumpet are seen, and Nunu admits to the player that he is the cause of everything. Nunu then leaves the room and the player has to fight the voice trumpet. When the player wins, they have a conversation with the blue vacuum and learn that Nunu is responsible for creating an army of newborns who will take over the land and is given an ultimatum: either join him in his reign or fight. If the player chooses to fight Nunu, one of 2 endings can happen. First, Nunu sends Po out to fight, and if the player defeats Po, they will proceed to destroy Nunu with a chainsaw. The military arrives and teams up with the player to fight the army of newborns. This is the good ending. If the player cannot beat Po, they will all be killed. The military still shows up, but without the help of the player, they are overrun, and the last thing that is heard is Sergeant Miles saying, "God help us." This is the bad ending. Now, if the player decides to team up with Nunu, 2 other endings can be found. Nunu tells us that if we want to join him, we have to be reborn, and in order to do that, we need to consume custard. If the player chooses to eat the custard, they will become infected and will be seen with empty, bloody eye sockets. Nunu tells the player that they will be the greatest reborn of them all, and this is the evil ending. If the player refuses to eat the custard, Po throws the player into a vat of tubby custard, turning him into the crawler tubby. As the screen goes black, Nunu can be heard saying he will obey his command. This is the regretful ending, and that is finally it for the entry of this iceberg. This single entry will probably take up at least a quarter of the entirety of the video length of the entire iceberg. This one entry will take up at least a quarter of it, but that is the end of tier 3 and, unfortunately, the end of this video.